check, check. Check 1, 2. Testing, testing 1, 2, 3. Microphone check. I think he's going to need the space for all his papers, unfortunately.
So, can you plug into that thing?
I can't. I don't have a plug.
Because that should be able to pop off the Sennheiser wireless.
Yeah, but I don't have a plug. Is the problem?
That is the plug.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know how to make that work?
So you do this. And then that plugs right into the XLR.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, make sure it works. Okay.
Yeah. Check, check. All right, what time is it? So if it's too hot, you might need to change it to line, but check. Check 1, 2. Testing, testing 1, 2, 3. Mic check. Check 1, 2. Testing, testing 1, 2, 3. Microphone check. Check 1, 2. Testing, testing 1, 2, 3. Mic check. Check 1, 2. Testing, testing 1, 2, 3. Microphone check. Check 1, 2. Probably be the last microphone check before we get started. Anyone else needing a microphone check? Check, check, check. Check 1, 2. Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. Mic check. Check 1, 2. Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. Microphone check. Check 1. Everyone good?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Miranda Bowersox. I'm the Butte County Sheriff's Public Information Officer. I'd like to welcome you to this evening's press conference. We'll be handling this press conference just as we have previously, where the speakers will all come up individually, and after that, we'll hold a question and answer session. So please wait to ask questions until the very end. First up, we'll have Sheriff Corey Honey.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, my name is Corey Honey. I'm the sheriff and coroner of Butte County. Tonight, we have a number of things to update you on. I want to start off by reiterating, as I have done during my press briefings in the past, that the information I'm providing you tonight is the best information that we have to date. We continue to get new information and refine the information that we have. So anything that I tell you tonight is subject to clarification. As a matter of fact, I have some clarifications that I want to talk with you about later in my briefing with regard to the number of people who have been found deceased. I'll start off with our ongoing effort to account for people who have been listed as unaccounted for. As of today, we have accounted for 2,689 individuals. That's a very good number. Those were all individuals who were listed on the unaccounted for list, and we've had detectives and investigators working to identify those individuals and make sure they're safe. As of today, the current list of unaccounted for individuals is 203. You'll recall that last week, or late last week, or early last week, I'm sorry, that number rose to almost 1,300. So the fact that it's down to 203 today is a positive trend. And I'm told by our detectives and investigators that they're working steadily to try to get that number even lower. I want to give you a little bit of an update as to the law enforcement operation within the areas that are still currently evacuated. We've told you that we've had law enforcement officers patrolling those areas to protect them from people who would be in there unlawfully or doing things that were in violation of the law. And I'll give you a brief update about that. From November 8th through this morning, Butte County Sheriff's deputies have made 21 arrests of individuals who were located within the areas under evacuation due to the campfire. Those arrests include charges of entering a closed emergency area without authorization, looting, robbery, possession of stolen property, and the unlawful possession of firearms. Of particular note is an arrest that occurred today in the Concow area. A subject by the name of David Stuckey was arrested by Butte County deputies for allegedly making terrorist or criminal threats towards PG&E workers in the area. I say that because a lot of people are very anxious to get back into those communities, into their properties. We are very anxious to get people back into those properties. But the thing that we have to do before we can allow that is to ensure that the area is safe for the public to return. Those PG&E workers up there are working diligently to help us get to that point. And I understand people are angry and frustrated about that, but threatening those individuals only impedes our effort to make the area safe so that we can get people back in there. As of today, I'm happy to report that there were no additional human remains located today. That is a trend that we're seeing. We've had fewer and fewer human remains being located, and that's positive because we've made good progress and covered the vast majority of the area that we need to recover, and the fact that we're finding fewer and fewer of those remains is a positive thing. That said, to date, the total number of fatalities stands at 88, and I want to explain how we came to that number. First off, during the course of our recovery efforts, we send teams out that consist of coroner's investigators, search and rescue members, urban search and rescue members, firefighters, and forensic anthropologists. Unfortunately, many of the remains that we locate have been nearly completely consumed by the fire, and so what they are recovering are bones and bone fragments. Earlier this week, we reported that there were 2 case numbers that were issued in error. What happened there was The searchers went to a location where there was believed to be 2 individuals. They located human remains in the form of bones and bone fragments from those 2 locations. Each individual was assigned a case number, which is how we keep track of the individual person. Later on, search teams went back to that location to check it again. That's part of our process, is to double check areas where we think that there might be human remains, part of the due diligence that we are hoping to achieve here, and found additional human remains. At the time, 2 additional case numbers were issued for those individuals, but when those remains were taken to the Sacramento County Coroner's Office, it was determined that they were the same 2 people who we had recovered, and the 2 additional case numbers were issued in error. So that's why the count went down. Going forward, though, the analysis that takes place at the Sacramento County Coroner's Office often involves forensic anthropologists who are looking at bones or small bone fragments. And in recent analysis, they looked at some bones and determined that the remains of what we thought were 2 individuals were actually the remains of 3 individuals. So we had to separate those remains out, and we had to add another case number. So ultimately now our count today is 88 human remains have been located at this point. I've tried to explain this, or I've gone into detail to explain this to you because I want you to understand 2 things. First off, as I've always told you, we've tried to give you the best information we have at the time, subject to clarification as we get new information, and this is an example of that. But number 2, this illustrates how difficult this task is. This illustrates how painstaking the work is and how diligent the teams, including the forensic pathologists, are ultimately as they go through this process. We're doing everything in our power to recover the remains, everything in our power to identify those remains and then return them to their family members. It's unfortunate that there is a scenario where there's some confusion as we go along, but I would rather give you the information that we've got at this point, go back, check it, and then correct it as we go forward. In addition to our ongoing effort to recover human remains, as you know, we have been working diligently to identify those individuals and notify their next of kin. Tonight, I have more names to release to you. I'm going to read those names. I'm going to do my best to pronounce their names correctly. If I mispronounce it, I apologize. It's no disrespect intended to those individuals or their family. And then we will issue a press release at the end of this conference so that you can have the correct spelling and the age and the residence, the city of residence. So tonight I am reporting that we have identified and notified the next of kin for the following individuals. Joyce Akeson, age 78, of Paradise. Carol Arrington, age 88, of Paradise. David Bradford, age 70, of Paradise. Larry Brown, age 72, from Paradise. Joanne Caddy, age 75, of Magalia. Elizabeth Gala, age 80, from Paradise. Richard J. Garrett, age 58, from Concow. Eva Holt, age 85, from Paradise. Sarah Magnuson, age 75, Paradise. Joanne Malarkey, age 90, Paradise. John Malarkey, age 89, Paradise. Deborah Morningstar, age 66, Paradise. Vernice Reagan, age 95, Paradise. Russell Stewart, age 63, Paradise. Victoria Taft, age 67, Paradise. And David Young, age 69, of Concow. And I'll just say at this point, my condolences go out to their family members. Certainly a very difficult time, and I am sorry that we have to go through this. I now want to turn to another issue that weighs heavy on our minds and is something that I know the community is very, very anxious to understand, and that is our ongoing effort to open these areas that have been evacuated and allow people to reenter. I want you to understand that we understand that you are frustrated. We get frustrated as well. We want to be able to get you back into those locations as quickly as we possibly can. I understand that the fire is out, but there are still threats that have to be addressed and mitigated before we can allow the public to return. There are many agencies and crews that play an active role in ensuring that the area is safe for reentry. And as the sheriff and my colleague from the town of Paradise, Chief Reinbold, we can't open an area to the general public until these other entities have told us that it is safe for reentry. We've brought some of them here today to help explain their work so that we can give people an idea of the very difficult task that is ahead of us, and the fact that we are working hard to get that done. But I want you to understand, we meet twice a day with all of these stakeholders. We go over what has to be done in order to open these areas to the public. And there is a back and forth, give and take. There's pushing and prodding that goes on. But at the end of the day, if someone, one of these stakeholders tells us that it's not safe for us to open it up, it would be irresponsible for us to go against that advice and open it until they say it's ready. Some of those agencies include environmental health, public health, PG&E, AT&T, Comcast, propane companies, the Public Works Department, the irrigation districts, the water department, town officials, of course, my staff, the chief's staff, California Highway Patrol, the National Guard. There's a whole host of agencies and people who have to come together and look at these areas to determine whether or not it's safe for people to return. And so we're all meeting on a daily basis to try to get to that point. The size and scope of this fire is unprecedented. And I realize that people are frustrated and want to get back in, but no one has ever had to deal with something this massive, this big. And I can tell you that we are working hard to get that done. I know that we're receiving lots of calls from very frustrated people. We're trying to do our best. But I would ask that you please understand this process and bear with us. We want to get you home as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, I will give my colleague, Chief Reinbold, an opportunity to make a statement, and then we'll start bringing up some of the folks who are part of this reentry process to explain what's going on and hope to give you a better idea of where we're at and how quickly we're working to do that. I will make one other statement, and the chief can expand on this one, but we've heard about people needing to get their private vehicles. We're working together with the police department and the CHP to try to come up with a system that would allow that. We're also working to try to open up a corridor between the lower part of Paradise, Chico, and up into Magalia. We think that that would be a very beneficial thing, and so those things are being worked on. We hear the concerns and we're trying to address them. Chief?
Thank you, Sheriff. My name is Eric Reinbold. I am the Paradise Police Chief. I do want to reassure the citizens that we are continuing with a very strong presence of police enforcement within the town of Paradise to protect the remaining residential and commercial structures and property that is left behind after the fire. We are continuing to coordinate our efforts with all of our outside law enforcement agencies, and the sheriff named a few, but there are a lot of agencies out there working with us to continue to support the town and provide security. The town is committed to continue working with those agencies as we work through mitigating the risks, and we come up with our plan for re-entry when the time is right. and we will continue a strong law enforcement presence as we enter into that process. So this isn't about me, but I'm affected by this personally. I lost my home. I stand beside each and every one of you experiencing the same frustrations. There are no unnecessary delays. We are doing everything that we can to move through this process as quickly as possible to allow re-entry into the area so we can start the healing process. So that's what I have for tonight, and I'll be available for questions.
So up next, our representative for PG&E.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis McAleese, and I'm a director with PG&E, helping to oversee the restoration of the gas and electric service. First, I'd like to thank Sheriff Honey for the invitation to join you tonight. Our hearts remain with the people that have been impacted by the Camp Fire. We know your communities have been hit hard, and all of us at PG&E will be here to help you rebuild and recover. As you know, the Camp Fire caused substantial damage to our local electric and gas systems. And we have several PG&E emergency operations centers open to guide our response to this event. This includes a base camp that we established outside of Paradise at the Tuscan Ridge Golf Course. There are nearly 2,500 employees based now at the camp, and we are continuing to respond in full coordination with local agencies and first responders. Mutual assistance from other utilities are also on the ground, and others are on their way from as far away as Hawaii and Florida. This speaks to the extent of the damage to both the gas and electric system. As access is granted to additional fire-impacted areas, PG&E crews will continue to assess our infrastructure for damage and work towards safely restoring as many customers as possible. I want to be clear that any initial restoration in the fire-impacted communities will be temporary, with the goal of returning immediate services to you. It will be new equipment, and it will meet the latest fire safety codes and standards, but it will not be a permanent solution. That's because immediate restoration for many areas will not be possible, and we're not going to reconstruct an entire system until your affected communities have had the opportunity to fully plan how you want to rebuild. As for your access to the fire-impacted areas, I know that many of you are anxious to return to your property as soon as possible. Like other entities, we're working hard to make the area safe, but there are a number of unsafe situations that need to be addressed prior to reentry. The area currently remains hazardous for reentry due to the presence of vast amounts of debris, like debris from the fire, electrical lines, and equipment on the ground, and in the trees and have not been fully cleared, and thousands of fire damaged trees that have not yet been removed. These are very real threats to personal safety, and the last thing anybody wants is to see someone injured as they return to their property. We are working hard to safely address all of these hazards, and we'll complete our work as soon as possible. Lastly, we'll continue to coordinate our efforts closely with the sheriff and all other entities, first responders. Thank you.
Next, we have External Affairs Manager from AT&T, Alice Perez.
Good evening. My name is Alice Perez, and I'm with AT&T. AT&T also, understands the necessity to restore our services as quickly as possible, but our priority is also safety, as you've heard from everybody else. And immediately following the Camp Fire in Paradise, we worked hard to restore and maintain network operations as quickly and safely as conditions allowed for us to do so. We support the first responders, our customers, and the affected communities with portable cell sites in affected areas, and we continue to work to repair the damaged equipment. As we continue to make repairs to our network, our wireline network, we have prioritized our efforts to benefit the greatest number of customers. And as they mentioned earlier, there are daily conversations that take place around about the reprioritization, and that's how we're looking to reprioritize our efforts in the community. Our employees remain in the field, many of which have been called in from other work locations to assist with these ongoing restoration efforts. We have brought in employees from other areas to help with this, and most of our crews are working 12 to 14 shifts daily in very challenging conditions, and critical work has continued throughout the holidays. Our crews are basically working from the time the sun goes up until the time the sun goes down. They cannot work in the evening due to safety issues. We need to ensure first priority always is the safety. We are prioritizing the work to restore service to the highest number of customers and are working as quickly as we possibly can. We understand that in some areas, the damage assessment has been critical, and we need to complete the necessary work and really ask the community to be patient with us as we work through this. In some areas that are more severely burned, restoration may take longer, and we apologize for that. However, believe me, we are working as quickly as we can, considering safety as the #1 priority. We want to make sure that any repairs that we're doing are done in a safe manner, and in addition to that, making sure that we are restoring services that will benefit the community in the long haul, not just on a temporary basis. We're communicating consistently to our customers as services are restored. We have waived charges and bill credits and are happy to help address customer concerns if they arise. We do have a toll-free number for customers to call if you have very specific questions that you're concerned about your services. You can actually ask me questions on the site as well. Our team will continue to work diligently on the extensive restoration effort and generally care for all of our affected customers and the hardships they have endured. We are working with the Paradise community and other utilities to rebuild together. We are committed to working as a team and ensuring first and foremost the safety of all involved in restoring services, as well as the safety of all members of the community. Thank you.
Next, we have Dennis Schmidt, the Director of Butte County Public Works.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Schmidt. I'm Director of Public Works for Butte County. I have 3 things to discuss with you tonight and be open for questions at the end. Number 1 is current county roadway issues. I'll talk briefly about that, anything we have in the fire footprint. I will be talking about the debris flow potential and also talking about roadway detours and the incoming snowstorms. In terms of current roadway issues, all the county roadways within the fire perimeter have been field reviewed. All the hazards have been marked with barricades, and we have plans put in place on how to fix all those hazards that have been identified. Guardrail, we issued an $800,000 contract last week for replacement of all the guardrail that was damaged on Skyway. That work continues. It should be completed by the end of next week. All the regulatory signs, stop signs, have been replaced that were damaged, and all the warning and guide signs are in process of being replaced so that we can end up with a safe roadway when we get done. Guardrail and all the secondary roads, there has been a contract awarded for that. These are all the roads that are not federal aid system roadways, and that contract should be completed by mid to late December. Upcoming weather and potential for debris flow. Every large fire, every significant fire, debris flow is a potential concern. We've been meeting with all of our partners from the National Weather Service to the Sheriff's Office to CAL FIRE to put together a plan, make sure we know how to respond appropriately should the conditions come up that could potentially trigger a debris flow. There are 3 main factors that cause a debris flow to occur. The first is severity of the burn. We're lucky in this case that our burn, even though it was a horrendous fire, it was not an extremely hot fire, and it did not scorch the earth as badly as it could have. The second factor is steepness of the hillside. It is what it is. We can't change that. And then third is the intensity of the rainfall. We understand 2 of the 3 variables very well. The rainfall is what we cannot predict with any degree of accuracy at this point until that storm is upon us. Generally, what the public is going to see is 2 stages of notification by the National Weather Service for debris flow. The first will be called a flash flood watch. That will be issued somewhere in the 6 to 12 hour time frame ahead of a potential event happening. That's really the public's first chance to say, this is a concern, I need to pay attention. The second stage notification will be a flash flood warning. That's a very specific warning that is issued in response to meeting certain criteria in terms of rainfall intensity, seeing debris flow begin to happen out in the field, or spotter reports of conditions that could lead to debris flow. The warning we get when those flash flood warnings are issued can be as little as 5 minutes. So it's really incumbent on the public when they repopulate into these areas within the fire footprint that they are tuned into the Weather Service, they are following that, and they're paying attention to it, especially once those warnings start and the advisories are issued. In terms of background, the United States Geologic Service has done an extensive study of this fire and has put together a map that shows the debris flow potential. That is all available on the web. The document shows the likelihood of a debris flow based on percentages, based on a rainfall intensity of 1 inch per hour. We can certainly receive heavier storms than that, but that's their design storm that they use for that. So what does this mean for the public? Once residents are repopulated within the fire footprint, again, I mentioned they really need to pay attention to those weather forecasts and the updates and news releases from the sheriff's office. You may not be given very much time when there's a warning issued that there's a problem. It's critically important that every single person that repopulates within this fire footprint knows that they may be placing themselves at risk when they do that until the vegetation has regrown and the soil has stabilized. Any episode of heavy rain or thunderstorm activity is cause for alarm, whether you're a resident, a law enforcement officer, a utility worker. If you're out there and you're seeing the hail bouncing off the hood of your pickup, that means you need to get to high ground because there's a very good potential that there could be a debris flow. For residents or utility workers, anytime they see evidence of soil movement, if your utility guys are out in the field and you see logs floating down through Butte Creek, that's an indicator that we've got a problem upstream. If you're starting to see land subsidence or land sliding, again, that's a 911 call to the sheriff's office so that they can get engaged in that process and figure out what's going on and issue the appropriate warnings to the residents in that area. Last item I want to talk about was the upcoming weather and challenges with the detour. As most people know that are repopulated in the Upper Ridge, their primary access now is up Skyway through Inskip and Butte Meadows and then out to Highway 32. It's a paved road, but it's a long ways out of their normal way. We understand that. The challenge is with the incoming weather system starting late Wednesday evening or early Thursday morning, we're probably going to start getting snow at the upper elevations. And towards the end of Thursday into Friday, we'll have snow down to probably 4,000 foot elevation. So that's going to make it about a 25-mile trip through the snow that residents will have to go through to go that route. We will have snow equipment assigned to that route. We will keep it plowed. But if you're in a two-wheel drive car, as steep as those slopes are, it's going to be very difficult to be effective to get where you want to go. So I'm putting a big heads up out there. If you feel that you will need to travel that route from Thursday on, you need to either be in a four-wheel drive or in a car that has chains and you know how to put the chains on and you know how to drive with chains. The other option that motorists can utilize to get into Chico is a gravel and dirt roadway. It's called Powelton Road to Doe Mill to Garland. I drove this on Friday. It's no fun. It's about a 5-mile-an-hour roadway max. Ground clearance is your friend on this roadway. I did see a two-wheel drive Dodge Challenger go through there. Going the other way from me, I would not recommend that. It really should be a four-wheel drive or an SUV, something that has some ground clearance if you're going to use that route. There also was a lot of traffic on it, and it's just not a very easy route to get where you need to be. But in an emergency, if you can't drive through the snow, that is another option. That's what I had. Thank you.
And we have Shelby Boston, Director of Butte County Employment and Social Services.
Good evening. My name is Shelby Boston, Director of Employment and Social Services here in Butte County. And during incidents such as this, I act as the Care and Shelter Branch Director. Tonight, I'm going to share an update on the shelter situation as well as give an update on the Disaster Recovery Center. Butte County is continuing to work in partnership with the American Red Cross on a transition plan to consolidate shelters in an effort to ensure the sustainability of shelter accommodations. We want to ensure all residents that are needing shelter have their needs met and are out of the elements, especially with this weather that we're expecting. Butte County Fairgrounds in Gridley will continue to operate to meet the immediate and critical temporary housing needs of evacuees in the interim until mid- and long-term temporary housing solutions are in place for fire survivors. All other shelters will transition into the Butte County Fairgrounds in the coming days. We are working to secure an additional, more localized shelter location. There'll be more information on that in the coming days as well. We are providing transportation to shelter evacuees to get them to the next location. As we are continuing the consolidation of the shelters, all the current shelter resources will be reallocated to the Butte County Fairgrounds once the transition of all current shelter evacuees is complete. At this time, the shelters at Bidwell Junior High School in Chico and the Yuba Sutter Fairgrounds in Yuba City have closed. Fire evacuees have been transitioned to the Butte County Fairgrounds shelter. The neighborhood church shelter in Chico will transition to the Butte County Fairgrounds tomorrow, and transportation will be provided again. The plan for transitioning the shelter at the Church of the Nazarene in Oroville is still being worked out, and we'll have more details in the near future. Staff are actively communicating with the shelter consolidation plan with evacuees currently residing in the shelter scheduled for closure. So now I want to talk a little bit about the Disaster Recovery Center. The county continues to provide support services, resources, and information at the Disaster Recovery Center located here in Chico at the old Sears building. It is a great one-stop shop for all recovery information. If you haven't been there yet, I really strongly encourage individuals to go. Take your time. You can go as many times as you need to during the time we're open. And we know that people will have more questions, and it is overwhelming at times. It's a lot to take in. So we encourage folks to come as many times as needed. I also want to encourage folks to come later in the day. So we know there's lines first thing in the morning. If you come later in the day, there's not lines, and especially in the early evening. We're open from 9 to 7 every day. And in the early evening, there's no lines. You can walk in. People are all still there and are willing to help. We also want to emphasize that there are behavioral health resources there at the DRC in Chico, and they're there to help. They're there to listen. They're there to support. And if nothing else, to give you a hug, if that's what you need. We continue to put information up on the ButteCountyRecovers.org website, and we will continue to do that through the duration of this incident. I can't stress enough how important it is to register for FEMA. Many people have already, but it's very crucial for the recovery that you do take the time to do that. And you ask questions at the DRCs when you're there. If you're unsure or you get letters in the mail and you're not sure what it means, be sure to come in and ask those questions. People are there to help. I wanted to also just give a snapshot. Some folks are really confused. What is a DRC, a Disaster Recovery Center? And they'll hear other terms like Local Assistance Center. The DRC, they're offering services such as the county assessors, treasurer, tax collector, county clerk recorder, environmental health, and of course behavioral health. In addition to that, we have child support services there, development services, and my department, Employment and Social Services. So if you've lost your Medi-Cal card, if you've lost your EBT card, you can get your replacements there at the DRC instead of coming into one of our one-stops. I think that's it for right now. Thank you.
Next, we have Dorian Cottrell, Director of Butte County Behavioral Health.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Dorian Kittrell. I am the Director for the Department of Behavioral Health for Butte County. I first want you all to know that the behavioral health operations is running at full capacity with the exception of our Paradise sites. This includes our adult and youth outpatient services for both mental health and substance use treatment in Gridley, Oroville, and Chico. Our crisis services, including our inpatient unit, our crisis stabilization unit, our crisis residential program, our Chico mobile crisis team, and our emergency room triage teams are all working. In response to the Camp Fire, our department has been working and coordinating with emergency mental health services along with the American Red Cross, the National Guard Behavioral Health Unit, and the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, both in the shelters and in the Disaster Recovery Center. I really want to take a moment to thank those agencies for their assistance. They've been really amazing to us in supporting us. Along with the mission to provide emotional support and behavioral health services to our community during this traumatic event, one of the top priorities of my department is to locate all of our clients that were impacted by the fire to ensure their safety and connect them with continued care in one of our remaining operating sites. While we've located many of our clients who were impacted and we provided them with assistance such as medication refills, counseling services, other appointments in other areas, we still have many that we have not been able to reach. If you or someone you know was receiving behavioral health services in Paradise and have not yet contacted us, please call our access line. This is very important. We care about you. If you are in our services, we want to reach out to you and get you connected. That access line number is 530-891-2810, or it's toll-free 1-800-334-6622. And both of those numbers are on our ButteCountyRecovers.org site. Again, please call us so that we know that you're safe. Also, even if you plan to relocate outside of the county and you are one of our recipients of care, please let us know so that we can make sure and transfer all of your information to your new care provider if you're going to relocate outside of the county. It's going to take time for the community to recover, and both physically and emotionally. Talking about and sharing your experiences with your friends and families is important. It's very important. Our shared experiences is what makes us stronger, and it makes us more resilient. I encourage all of you to utilize the resources on the ButteCountyRecovers.org page, where we have posted information regarding the normal reactions to a traumatic event and ways that you can take care of yourself and your children. There is also helpful information for caregivers, teachers, and first responders. If you feel you need additional support, we have included links and contact information for immediate assistance. These include the Disaster Distress Helpline at 1-800-985-5990, or if you prefer to text, they have a text line for 66746. Again, all on ButteRecovers.org. Also on our page, you will find a resource from Anthem Blue Cross. They have generously provided online access to doctors, therapists, and psychologists through live video from a smartphone or a computer. This service is free, and you do not need to be an Anthem Blue Cross member to access this services. It is open to the entire community, and that service will be available through December 31st, 2018. If you do not have access to a phone or a computer to receive these services, please go to the Disaster Recovery Center, and we will hook you up there. We will be adding additional information and resources to our website as they become available. The most important thing we can do to make our recovery successful is to take care of ourselves and our minds and our bodies. As we move forward through the next few weeks and months, the Department of Behavioral Health will continue to plan and coordinate with our local service providers, stakeholders, and education partners to address the behavioral health needs of our community as we recover together. Thank you.
Next, we have Eric Lamoureux, the Senior State Official for Cal OES.
Good evening. Cal OES and all of state government continues to be fully mobilized in your community and committed to your community. This is one of the largest and most complex disaster recovery operations in state history. From the County Emergency Operations Center, the Paradise COC, the Incident Command Post here, we're closely coordinating every day with Butte County and Town of Paradise officials across a multitude of fronts, identifying the resources that can be brought to bear, the actions that can be taken to expedite the recovery process. Today, our most significant priority is beginning the first phase of the debris removal. On that front, removal of most of the hazardous waste materials will begin on Monday. We've activated the State Department of Toxic Substances Control and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to carry out that work throughout the entire county. And Adam Palmer, my partner from the Department of Toxic Substances Control, will provide some further information for you tonight on exactly what's involved in that cleanup process. We also continue to work to finalize our strategy with local officials and our federal partners on the second phase of the debris removal, where we'll seek the community's permission to remove all the remaining hazardous waste from each home site. We'll be working with the county in the coming days to provide further details on that program. Finally, I want to continue to stress what others have, the importance of registering for assistance with the federal government and not determining that you may not be eligible. Everybody needs to engage in that process. There's a tremendous amount of help and resources available for you, and we want to do everything we can collaboratively and collectively to ensure that we're helping each individual get out of shelters and get into a more sustainable housing solution in the days ahead. It's just always important to remember that this recovery is going to be a marathon. And we at the state government are certainly committed to being with you through that entire process and working to clear whatever hurdles need to be cleared to help Butte County, the town of Paradise, recover from this disaster. Thank you.
Next, we have Adam Palmer, the Senior Environmental Scientist for the Department of Toxic Substances Control.
Good evening. My name is Adam Palmer. I'm the supervisor of the Emergency Response Program with the Department of Toxic Substances Control. DTSC, the department I work for, we were mission tasked by OES a few weeks ago to mobilize our hazmat crews and our staff to assess and remove all the household hazardous waste from private, public, and commercial structures that were destroyed by the Camp Fire. Due to the size and the scope of the incident, we requested additional assistance from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So when you see us in the field, it'll be a collaborative effort between my department as well as representatives from the US EPA. We're also going to be working closely with the Butte County Environmental Health Department, who we've historically worked with together in the past on other wildfires. As Eric pointed out, we will begin our initial phase 1 assessment on Monday, December 3rd. We'll be starting with 10 teams. We'll ramp that up to eventually 20 teams. Each team will be comprised of 6 to 8 individuals. We'll move out into separate operational areas. And what each team will do is they will approach either the public, private, or public property. And we'll first check for any radiologicals with a rad meter. We'll also use a multi-gas detector to make sure there's no off-gassing from any liquid waste that may still be on site. If any of those items are detected, it will be quarantined and removed by our contractor at the conclusion of the assessment. We'll then send in our hazmat crews, and they'll be looking for household hazardous waste. And what are the items that constitute household hazardous waste? There are a lot of the things we have in our garage under our sinks. Pesticides, fertilizers, bleaches, anything that's caustic or corrosive, acidic, fuels, gasoline and oils. You'd be surprised sometimes how much of that material actually makes its way through a fire. Batteries, especially in the rural areas, we see a lot of batteries. If people live off the grid and they have solar batteries, those can be pretty large, and we remove those as well. We'll look inside of each destroyed vehicle and remove any of the batteries we see in there. We'll also be addressing all the cylinders. We mitigate any cylinder up to 30 gallon, any of the propane tanks. If we can mitigate them on site, we'll remove the valve and mark them with the white X. That way when Cal Recycle comes in and does the debris removal, they'll know that it's just scrap metal and it can go off with the general debris. We'll also be dealing with any of the acetylene tanks, oxygen tanks. For those individuals that have their own private shop, they may do welding. We'll address those cylinders as well. Ideally, we like to mitigate those cylinders on site. But if we can't, we'll take them back to our staging area and mitigate those at a later date. That's primarily the material that we remove. So as a community, when you see our crews on site, like I said, you'll see 6 to 8 individuals. They'll be wearing Tyvek, hard hats, APRs. They'll be moving through the debris pile and doing the assessment. We'll be collecting all the data. We'll be tabulating and keeping an inventory of all the waste that's removed from the site. And that information will be shared with CalRecycle as well as the local agencies at the conclusion of our response. When we've completed our completed our assessment for HHW, we'll mark each property with a stake. It'll have a sign on it with the DTSC and the US EPA logo. It will also have a phone number on there. Typically, we provide the phone number of the local agency, in this case, Butte County, or maybe the Debris Removal Operations Center. So if people have any additional questions, they have a number they can call back. So I want to emphasize our focus will be strictly on HHW. We will not be removing any personal items, vehicles, anything that belongs to the residents. Our focus is strictly on the HHW. So, thank you.
So we have Kevin Hannis, the Deputy Federal Coordinating Officer for FEMA.
Good evening again. My name is Kevin Hannis. I'm the senior federal official for Butte County for this event with my partner Eric. Let me start off with a few little statistics of where we're at in the initial recovery. To date, as of last evening, we had over 17,000 households registered with FEMA. Of those, 14,000 have been referred to our Individuals and Households program, and a little over 7,000 of those have had their inspection. There are 4,500 plus eligible for FEMA assistance. Now you're saying, well, why is there a difference? If you have insurance, and you told us you have insurance, you were initially found not eligible. You were not denied. You were found initially not eligible until we understand what your insurance will be paying, because we cannot duplicate benefits. Or if there were duplicate records. If a husband and wife each registered separately for that address, that produces a duplicate record. Both would receive an ineligible letter from us until we can resolve those issues, and those happen very quickly. Or if you had multi-generational people living in the home, a lot of times those extended families will also register with that single address, and that will cause duplicative registrations, and we have to work our way through those. So with that, money approved to date for Butte County alone is over $20 million, is in the hands of survivors to begin their recovery process. We have over 260 individual households that have received our maximum grant of $34,400. On the Small Business Administration, they have already received back and approved 2,500 greater applications that are in the system working through it, and over $300,000 has been approved so far with the Small Business Administration. We do anticipate that number to increase greatly over the next several weeks. I will encourage you, if you are referred to the Small Business Administration, return that application to us. Whether you take the loan or are found ineligible for the Small Business Administration, without that return of that application and that determination by the Small Business Administration, we cannot process you for additional FEMA assistance under our Other Needs Assistance program. And so I highly encourage you, if you've been referred to the Small Business Administration, please return those applications. On our Transitional Sheltering Assistance Program, or the hotel program, currently eligible is 2,470 families, households, are eligible for this program. However, only 152 families have checked in. 8 of those have already checked out. This is a great program for you to get out of the shelters. It gets you into a hotel, it gets you into something safe, secure, and habitable, gets you out of that congregate sheltering conditions. And I highly encourage everyone who has registered with us and received a phone call that they are eligible for the TSA program, Transitional Shelter Assistance Program, to take advantage of that. It's open statewide. We are working with the local hoteliers to increase the capacity here of rooms available here in the greater Butte County area. Sacramento, we're doing all we can to open up hotel rooms. But take advantage of this program. Get out of that congregate sheltering, get into something that's a little bit more sustainable. And as we work through our housing solutions, both the intermediate and the longer-term housing solutions, we'll bring you out of those transitional shelter, those hotels, and bring you back to Butte County, work with you to go into a housing solution. On the housing issue, right now your best defense, your best solution for housing is to leverage the rental assistance that you were provided upon initial registration. If you are able to use that and to secure a lease, we ask you to bring that lease back to us at the Disaster Recovery Center, either here in Chico or in Orville, or get that lease to us so that we can advance you additional rental assistance. That is the most rapid way to begin your recovery, is taking advantage of that rental assistance. We are starting call-outs to find information from those who have registered with us and have a FEMA verified loss of greater than $17,000 if there is a need for direct housing. The manufactured housing units, travel trailers, or other options, direct lease options that we have. Those call-outs began in earnest late last week and will increase in their intensity over the next several weeks. Please respond to those calls. Let us know what your situation is, that we can properly assess and then work with local officials as well as the state of California to provide the best longer-term intermediate housing solution available to you. Let me talk about the rumors of I've been denied FEMA assistance. Nobody is denied. You are found initially ineligible. Please read past that first line of the letter. It will describe why you were found ineligible, whether you had insurance, whether you had within your insurance it was determined that you had additional living expense. It was a duplicate registration. We're missing some type of personally identifiable information to make sure you're you and you lived where you lived prior to the fire. If you're confused about that letter, you can call our 800 number at 1-800-621-3362, or you can come into one of the disaster recovery centers and speak to any of the FEMA agents there, and they will work you through that process and get the information we need to find you eligible for our programs. Again, that ineligible letter is just the first step. Never take the first no from FEMA. Please, don't take the first no. And also, don't worry about if I go to FEMA and I get assistance, that's taking it away from somebody else. The program is designed for you. These are your tax dollars working back from you. Please take advantage of those. And finally, let me close with a few thoughts. This is your recovery. This is a locally executed recovery supported by managed by the state and supported by the federal government. This is not a federal recovery. We are not here to direct or drive your recovery. Your local officials have been doing an outstanding job from day one, even during the response, starting to plan for this recovery. In Butte County, you have the right team at the right place to do the right things, and they have been doing the right things to make this a solid recovery that will produce a more resilient, sustainable recovery for each and every one of you. I think that should about do it.
Next, we have Mary Sakuma, the Assistant Superintendent for Butte County Office of Education.
Good evening. My name is Mary Sakuma, Deputy Superintendent, Butte County Office of Education. Educators throughout the Butte County school districts are returning to work officially this week. But you should know many have already been working hard to reconnect with their students and families, even as they cope with their own personal loss and disruption from the fire. I am deeply impressed with their professionalism, skills, and dedication to serving the families of Butte County. Butte County educators are champions. We are diligently getting ready for our second first day of school of the 2018-19 school year. We are on track to successfully reopen schools across the county on December 3rd. You should know that the finishing touches are being made to the relocation plans for students displaced in Paradise and Golden Feather districts. Golden Feather is moving from its Concow site to a refurbished Spring Valley School to be closer to their families. It will be ready to accept students on December 3rd. Paradise Unified has been making substantial progress in identifying temporary quarters in available Chico and Oroville buildings while it considers its longer-term options. We have a shared goal of reuniting students with their teachers in school settings that are suitable and effective. We understand their plan is being announced later today. All classrooms at sites that are able to reopen have been cleaned and wiped down by certified cleaning contractors who have tested them to make sure there are no contaminants. Many students have chosen to enroll in a school nearest to where they now reside after the evacuation. Those school districts are prepared to welcome these new students and make them comfortable in their new learning environments. Staff are undergoing training and advising on how to help themselves and their students cope with the trauma they've experienced. Our Butte County Office of Education staff have been developing an integrated plan for developing highly qualified grief and trauma counselors as needed. We know this is a confusing time, and people are anxious for details and information. People have so many questions, especially those who've been displaced by the fire. Our commitment is to keep information flowing and get answers to your questions as quickly as we can. We ask you to please check out our YouTube channel for regular video updates as part of our BCOE Campfire Newswire service. Thank you.
We're now going to open it up to question and answers. We're going to invite each individual up once, and they'll take all of the questions, and we'll move through the lineup that way. So Sheriff Corey Honey.
Any questions?
Thanks again. In terms of the search for remains, how much of the Detroit area have you covered, and do you think you're close to finding the remains you're going to find?
This is your first time here, right? Yeah, I understand. So I typically don't answer questions as to the percentages of things because I don't think it's an appropriate question given the task that we have. That said, we've made very good progress, and we've covered those residences where we have received information that human remains might be. Those targets, if you will, come in on a daily basis, and we'll continue to look at them if they come in. We've also looked at other locations where there was a higher probability of human remains. We've gone through and done a lot of work there and have made good progress there. And then finally, our goal is to look at every single structure where people may have been in order to do that. In the coming days, I think that I'll be able to give you a better update in terms of where we're at, but we've made very good progress. Good? Go ahead.
I happen to be on with a few owners, and I'll attacked by the fire.
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to be happy, but right now I'm a little unhappy. Because I know friends of mine that have a house destroyed, they got the money and they left the area. Now that I have the house, I have all kind of problems. I understand the problem and that you cannot make a decision about this unless the gentleman tells you when is ready. But those gentlemen, I'm talking about PG&E, AT&T, for substance control, you didn't do this the first time in your life. Give me a little term, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. I have to know what to do. I've been sleeping for the last 2 weeks in 6 beds. So where do I go from here?
So I appreciate your question. It's a good question, and I can completely understand the frustration of not having any kind of time frame. That's one of the things that we're working on, trying to get a better handle on that. I think the difficulty is, and I'll let them speak to it, but I think the difficulty is that as they get into the more populated areas or into the town, there's a great deal more infrastructure that they have to work with or deal with or repair. And there are things, oftentimes there are hazards that they don't yet know about until they get in there. I think that in the coming days, we want to work to get a better handle on that. But right now, I don't have an answer for you. I can't tell you it's going to happen in a day or a week or 2 weeks. But they do tell me that they're making good progress, and hopefully in the next week or so, we'll have a better idea of where you're at. That's the best answer I've got for you today. I wish it was better, but that's what I've got, okay? Thank you, sir. You've already had a question, so we're going to go back here.
Can you clarify the number for me? So there was the number of fatalities was at 87. There was the double count that went down to 85.
Right.
And then you had the two that stood out to 3.
And actually, the way that worked, there were 3 instances. That's how we got to the 3. There were 3 instances where there were the remains were collected in one bag. They were believed to be one individual. When they got to the morgue and they were examined by the forensic anthropologist, they determined that the bag contained the remains of 2 individuals. So on those 3 instances, that would add to the 3. Okay? Good.
And then do you have an estimate for the number of people who are misplaced right now?
Do you have an estimate for the number of people?
Or a hard number for the number of people who are misplaced?
I don't know what misplaced means.
Outside, if they're not living at home, because they lost their home because they're evacuated.
You mean people have been evacuated? I don't have that number. We can get that number for you right there. Go ahead.
Given the need for emergency warnings in the next week or so, how are you prepared to use code red or via to evacuate people in ED for the reflow, including workers who are in the zone?
Yeah, so that illustrates the ongoing complexity of this situation, where we went from a fire to now the potential for mudslides. You heard the information about how those could come on quickly. With regard to the workers and public safety, that would probably be messaged through our radio system and our standard ways in which we communicate with units in the field. Beyond that, the systems that we have in place, the emergency mass notification system like Code Red, as well as our traditional method of going into the locations, hopefully ahead of the time to warn people. It is something that causes some concern, and actually it's part of the discussion that we have with regard to re-entry or repopulation, because there's a genuine concern about allowing people into an area that might be susceptible to this kind of thing, and then having to re-evacuate them. And so part of that process is trying to determine whether or not that risk justifies the re-entry.
So Code Red remains functional in that area? You've got communication lines?
Well, if they're in that area, we should have had AT&T or the various entities tell us that we can go back in there. But that illustrates the difficulty of this entire process. Once you completely eviscerate the infrastructure, it makes everything difficult from that point forward. Those are great questions. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
I apologize if you answered this already, because
I understand.
Okay. How many areas are you going through daily? And is there a possibility that you
So I don't have an answer to the number of areas that we're going through daily. We have a strategy where we've worked to go to those locations where we had information to believe that human remains might have been located, and we've been able to work our way through that. As new information comes on, of course, we go to those locations. Other locations where we believe that there was a high probability of human beings residing, mobile home parks, things of that nature, we're in the process of going through all of those. In some cases, we've gone back 1 or 2 times in order to do our due diligence. And then, of course, the last part of that is to go to any location or structure where people may have been and where they might have been, even if it's not a high-density area, to search that. So that's an ongoing effort. We've made very good progress on that. So to the second question, regrettably, and if you've been up there, you know the level of devastation, and you understand how rapidly and intensely this fire burned. The remains that we are now recovering oftentimes are remains that have been almost completely consumed by the fire, leaving just bone and bone fragment. I'm told by the anthropologists in the area that that is probably the more likely scenario as we move forward, that there will be some remnant that could be identified as human remains or as the remains of an animal, which would then be, we'd have to use our anthropologists to make the distinction between animal and human. But the question was, is it possible that there could be a circumstance where someone was completely consumed by fire and therefore we wouldn't have something that we could collect or part of the collect? And I would say that it is within the realm of possibility. Yeah. Unfortunate, but it is within the realm of possibility. Let me see if anyone else has a question before I go with you. Go ahead.
What do you think is the most basic scientific explanation you can give for the root cause of this fire?
I can't give you a basic scientific explanation for the root cause of the fire, because that investigation is being conducted by CAL FIRE. They have arson investigators who are specifically trained to investigate the cause of fire. I've been focusing on my end of things, so I don't have that information. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hi, Mr. Honey.
Yeah.
For one, I'd like to say you're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir.
For two, do you have, I know you don't have an idea, but
Yeah.
like the Yankee Hill area?
Good question.
What?
Yeah, like when it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah. The question is, when is the Yankee Hill area might be open? So back to that, and I actually really thank you for the question. That is a good question, because it gives me an opportunity to talk about some of the other areas, Concow, Yankee Hill, Centerville, some of those others. In our planning meeting today, we talked a lot about that and trying to get an understanding of when those areas might be safe. I'm told that a lot of progress is being made, and that I hope that in the relative near future, we'll be able to get those open. But I can't give you a specific date, but we are working on it, and it is on my radar. Okay? Thank you, sir. You bet. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, anybody else? I know you're there. I got you. Anybody? Now you can ask it.
Sorry if I'm asking you to predict the future, but wanted to know if you suspect that the number of unaccounted for will continue to go down. And I know you've talked about this before, but in this stage, can you elaborate on how you're clearing the list of the unaccounted for and how difficult it is to identify?
Okay, so those are 2 questions, and we'll take, I'll take the first one first, which, actually just ask that to me again.
Sure. Do you think the number of the unaccounted for will continue to go down?
Stop right there. So the question is, do I think that the number of unaccounted for individuals will continue to go down? My sincere hope is that it is, and we're doing everything to, in our power to locate those individuals, hopefully find them safe, or determine whether or not they perished in the fire. But in terms of a prediction, I'm not going to make one. I'll just tell you that that's my hope. What's your second question?
Can you elaborate on how you're clearing the lists of the unaccounted for, how difficult it is to identify the remaining?
Right. So the question is, what efforts are we undertaking to try to locate the whereabouts of those individuals who are on the unaccounted for list? Is that correct? Yeah. So first and foremost, part of the process is asking the community to look at the list, members of the community look at the list to determine whether or not their name is on the list, and if they are, then to call us and let us know that they're safe. So that's the first mechanism that we're using to identify where those people are. But beyond that, we have a team of investigators that are investigating the whereabouts of those individuals, including recontacting the individuals who reported them and put them on the unaccounted for list to see if they've had any contact with them. Beyond that, we search our various databases that we have available to us to try to find a way to locate those individuals, reach out to them and locate them. We're in the process of looking at social media accounts to see if perhaps they checked in. Basically, we're using all of the same investigative techniques that we use anytime we're looking for someone who is missing or unaccounted for. We're not relying solely upon people to call in and let us know that they're safe. And as the trend hopefully continues where it goes down, we get to the point where we're using all of our investigative techniques to either one, account for those individuals and determine they're safe, or two, identify that they've perished and then identify them and notify their next of kin. Okay? Yes, sir.
To what extent did the rains hinder or undermine the search and rescue effort?
So I'm pleased to say that we had lots of, we had a significant number of searchers out. I think at one point we were well over 500 searchers from various disciplines and teams there. I am told that it did make it somewhat more difficult. There was the safety issue associated with the ground being saturated and the potential of trees falling and things of that nature. I'm told that they had to bring in a secondary process to search for human remains. What I mean by that is typically as they go through the debris, they scoop the debris into a screen and they sift it looking for the remains, separating them from the debris. When the rain came down, in some cases, it mixed with the ash and formed a clay-like substance. And then they used what they called wet sifting, where they brought in, with the assistance of the fire crews there, water and very gently washed away the clay, exposing the remains from the debris, and then they were able to sift it there. That said, there's been a lot of progress made, and I think overall, although it made it somewhat more difficult, we're still trending in the right direction. Yes, sir.
Someone mentioned vehicles or equipment that abandoned left behind that still functional.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned that, and that's something, yeah, I did, thank you. So the question is about vehicles that are still drivable in the area. We've gotten a lot of requests to help people get those out, and we're working on a plan that would allow people to contact us, get escorted up there, and get those vehicles. It's going to be a good amount of work to do that, but my staff, as well as Chief Reinbold's staff, along with CHP, are working to try to come up with a solution for that. Well, there's a lot of moving parts on that. I'm reluctant to give a time period, but it's something that we've asked them to work on. I understand, and I want you to get your truck, and we want to get into a situation where we can accommodate that. Thank you for the question, though. I appreciate that. Yeah. No, you've had too many questions. So, anybody else? Good. All right. Is it something along the same lines, or?
It's just about the human remains and whether or not you're finding it relatively easy. I know at the last press conference you guys talked about using DNA research.
Mm-hmm.
Are you finding it relatively easy, or is it difficult to identify the human remains?
There's nothing easy about this. This is just an unprecedented situation. It's extraordinarily difficult. Not only is it difficult to extract the DNA from the remains that we're dealing with, we also have to ultimately match it with the familial DNA. So it is an unprecedented situation, extraordinarily difficult. A great deal of resources have been brought to bear to do this, and we've brought cutting-edge technology here to do this. So despite how difficult it is, I think that we're moving in the right direction. All right? No further questions? Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Police Chief Eric Reinbold, Paradise? Okay. Dennis McAleese, PG&E Director. Okay. External Affairs Manager Alice Perez for AT&T. Dennis Schmidt, the Director of Butte County Public Works. Shelby Boston, the Butte County Employment and Social Services Director. Dorian Cottrell, the Butte County Behavioral Health Director. Eric Lemoreau, the Senior State Official for Cal OES. Adam Palmer, the Senior Environmental Scientist for the Department of Toxic and Substances Control.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for your earlier comments. I just wanted you to expand on them. I want to understand the scope of a contaminated house. When you're remediating these household products, these batteries, how long does this take? Is it like a mini Superfund site, each one of these? Can you really go into some granular detail on the process?
Yeah, so the question was asked, how much time do we spend, how much is involved to mitigate a site that, or a property that's been destroyed, either a private, commercial, or a public piece of property. So like I said earlier, we'll show up with, each crew will be comprised of 6 to 8 individuals. We'll have a couple vehicles. Everybody will be wearing Tyvek. We'll have APRs on, which is the half-face respirator. We'll have hard hats, booties, gloves. We'll enter the property. Like I said, we'll assess for any radiologicals, and we have in the past, maybe on 2 or 3 occasions, found rad sources, which we set aside, and we deal with those at the conclusion of the assessment.
What causes a rad source?
You know, we found some up in Nevada County after last year's fire, and the best I can figure is the person had some Fiesta ware, because they looked like the little salt and pepper shakers, and so we just attributed it to Fiesta ware. If you guys know anything about Fiesta ware, that was made in the 40s and 50s, the paint did contain a radioactive material. They don't make that anymore, obviously. So that was set aside, it's quarantined, and then we deal with that once we leave the site. So once we go onto the property with the 6 to 8 individuals, we'll look for any household hazardous waste, we'll look for containers of liquid, we'll look for paint cans. If there's any residual paint in there, like the pigment, if it still has color to it, we'll grab it and take it, remove it from the site. We look for any batteries. You know, one of the things we find in the rural areas, we see a lot of batteries, especially if we get off the grid and somebody has solar batteries. Those things can weigh a couple thousand pounds. We take those off site as well. If we find any solid waste, fertilizers, you know, the kind of stuff you can buy at Lowe's and Home Depot. If we see material like that that's still bagged up, that's been partially destroyed, we take that. One thing I didn't mention earlier, and I'm assuming we're going to see that out in some of the rural areas, we'll see the above ground kerosene tanks. If those have been damaged from the fire, we'll drain those tanks as well and remove the material. We'll leave the tank on site, we'll mark it with empty. And so that way when the debris crew comes in, they know it's been mitigated. The cylinders, we see everybody's got a 5-gallon propane tank because we all got gas barbecues. All those are mitigated on site if we can. We're marked with the white X, and then it's left as scrap metal. Same with the acetylene tanks for those people that have shops. So we see a lot of the acetylene tanks, oxygen tanks. Sometimes we see some exotic tanks, so we mitigate those on site as well, mark them with the white X, and then we leave them as scrap metal. So that's really the extent of what we do. We don't get into the sampling of the burn ash. Really our focus is just to get in there, remove the easily removable household hazardous waste, and then we move on to the next site. How long will a property take? You know, one residence can take 15 minutes. Another residence, if he has a lot of stuff, can take a half a day. And then we also have been mission tasked to deal with the commercial properties. So I'm assuming once we get into some of these commercial properties, especially if they're hardware stores, grocery stores, we might find a lot of waste oil, fuels, pesticides, fertilizers, stuff like that. That's going to take a significant amount of time. I know we've also been mission tasked to deal with the schools. I'm assuming if some of the high schools have been damaged, and I think they have been, we may encounter chemistry labs. So in chemistry labs, you're going to see a lot of chemicals, hazardous materials that need to be mitigated and removed. So, you know, it varies from property to property. Sometimes we can sweep a property in 20 minutes. Other times we'll be on a property for 8 hours. So there's no rhyme or reason to it.
There's two small follow-up questions.
Uh-huh.
A bunch of the survivors I spoke to who were there during the fire described the sound of explosions, which they were gas tanks popping.
Uh-huh.
When you have that kind of dispersal of contaminants, who does that testing of the ground, the soil, that kind of brownfield stuff?
The tanks and stuff, probably what you heard, probably were the large propane tanks, maybe the 250 to 300 gallon variety, and then you have the smaller 5 to 10 gallon ones that go with your barbecue. As far as the debris pile itself, when CalRecycle comes in and does the debris removal after completion of the phase 1 assessment, they'll remove all the debris. They'll probably take the top 2 to 4 inches of soil, and then they'll collect confirmation sampling from under the footprint of the structure that was destroyed, and they'll have it analyzed for metals. That's typically what we see post-fire, is a lot of high, concentrations of metals. If they see values that are above the established health cleanup criteria, they'll remove some additional soil until it gets it down below the cleanup number. So we're not really involved in the sampling. Once the debris removal starts, that really will be CalRecycle.
And then in terms of water contamination, the water supply and water system, I know there are boil water alerts all over, but I imagine this is a different order of magnitude. Are you guys testing the water? Is somebody else testing the water? And how do you clean water?
DTSC is not testing the water. I really can't speak to that. I would think the local water purveyor may be involved in that, possibly the regional board or even your local public health department. I can't speak to that. Yeah.
Are there any questions for Kevin Hannes from FEMA?
Yes, sir.
Sir, we understand that there are about 2,000 FEMA trailers that are expected. Do you know when they might arrive and where they might be placed?
That's great information. That's the first I've heard about that. So the FEMA trailers, right now, again, as I said earlier, we're starting our initial call-outs to determine what the actual need is going to be. And as we do that assessment, we have trailers that could be made available and here when we need them. So we do just in time. We either purchase locally or we have trailers that will come here. But I don't have a number of trailers that are on the way because we're still doing that assessment of trying to find out what the actual need is going to be. Once we do that, then there'll be time to, first we'll look to commercial parks that already have pads available. We would lease those and put travel trailers into those, or mobile home parks, put mobile homes into those first before we look to other means to put those. Yes, ma'am.
You said earlier that some 2,400 families are eligible for the transitional hotel program.
Yes, I did.
But that only 152 had checked in. To what do you attribute that drop?
So, the question is there's a large number eligible, but just a few have checked in. I think a lot of it has to do with people want to understand what the condition of their property is. A lot of folks may already know that their house is gone, but they want to see it before they go because some of the hotels that are being offered may be several hours away. And I think as we get working with local communities to officials to get those areas open, not to live, but to get an idea of what their condition their property's in, then they'll start taking advantage of that. They want to stay close to home. Right now there's not a whole lot of hotel rooms available in this immediate vicinity.
So the vouchers are not conditional. It's not like a voucher that gets you to a Best Western in X town. It's a voucher that you could use, but only what's
Well, it's not even a voucher. You will receive a call from FEMA that says you're eligible for the Transitional Shelter Assistance Program. They will link you to a website that shows what hotels are available in the state of California. You choose your hotel, you check in, we pay the tab, you take care of meals and incidentals. Yes, ma'am.
I was intrigued by this gentleman's story who came here and said his house is still standing and he's sort of in this limbo. But what is the situation in terms of your eligibility for FEMA assistance if your home isn't gone?
So if your home is not gone and you have insurance, additional living expense insurance, or sometimes dislocation living expense, that's your first line of defense to leverage those that go. If your home is still standing and you're still in the evacuation zone or a zone that is not open to fully reside in, we ask that you contact FEMA because then we can provide assistance if you don't have that additional living expense into our hotel program. And so we highly encourage those individuals to contact us. And once your property becomes able to be lived in, then we check you out of our program and help you get back home. All right, thank you all.
Are there any questions for Mary Sakuma, the Assistant Superintendent of Butte County Office of Education?
Thank you. Forgive me if you answered this already, but do you have an estimate of the number of students that have been displaced that your district might have to be absorbing?
Okay. Well, one point of clarification, the question is how many students are needing to be absorbed by other school districts, students that have been displaced. And I appreciate your question because the Butte County Office of Education exists to support our school districts, our charter schools, and in cases like this, even our private school students when necessary. So there are approximately 4,500 students who are displaced from the communities of Concow, Paradise, Magalia, and areas surrounding. But I do want to be clear that it's a total of around 30,000 students that have been out of school now and will be returning on December 3rd. So we don't yet have hard data on exactly where each student has enrolled. Many, many families are waiting because it's really important to them that their student gets reunited with their teacher. Thank you.
Okay, this concludes tonight's press conference. I'd like to remind you to sign up for email updates by texting BC Recovers to 22828, and make sure you check out the website, buttecountyrecovers.org. Have a nice night.